Let's go over the procedure one more time to ensure everyone is clear on their roles.
Understood. I'll handle the initial patient assessment.
In some ways, like if we think back to some of our hospital experiences, how many times do you get asked the same questions? Every time someone comes to see you, they'll ask you the same questions, not only who you are, your date of birth, and they'll ask, maybe do the same tests and things like that. But I agree in that a lot of that is just automation as opposed to AI. And yeah, I agree, rather than trying to say, let's just use AI to cure cancers once and for all, let's just figure out how we can just improve those efficiencies, because you could just make a lot more efficiencies with that rather than the super advanced stuff.
So it was a case study within India. So for example, a patient who is visiting hospital quite often gets sick more often because of the exposure to different types of patients. The other thing was what the other study was, because of strikes and certain things, one hospital was shut down for a few days. They realized that patients who were released from the hospital, but they're not under critical care, but just released and said, okay, now care for you at home, doing basic IVs, they recovered much faster. And this is when there was more and more stress on efficiency and optimization. Like, when do you even release a patient? At what situation and what? I think this is a phenomenal study, which again, as Mo said, right, like not the decision making of the AI, but collecting the data, making sense of the data, and cleaning up what needs to be done. But the decision making still has to be with the nurses, with the doctors, with someone who is an expert on this topic. Like the China government is putting a pressure, right? Like if you're an influencer for a certain topic, you have to be an expert of that topic. So yeah, if you want the hotel topic, why not? Because for me, as someone who do not eat outside so much, and then I love baking, and then I saw this they call recipe management software, computerized inventory, and robotics or something like that. For me, that was just didn't ever expect reading this in a bakery review magazine.
I actually read earlier, just before this, when I was looking at the Gemini 3, and they were talking about on their press release some of the use cases. They said you could have a family cookbook in different languages, and it would kind of merge it all together and translate and things like that. So there you go. They're thinking about cooking, which is very important. Yeah, an interesting use case. I mean, that would be quite a good use case for a robot, I would think, in terms of supporting you. But then again, there's this thing of, it's the art of cooking that, again, sort of from a human perspective, it's the making that's quite enjoyable. I'm sure you've got a view on that, Perry.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, what the hell are we going to use the Tin Man strategy to create art? I hope not. I think the most brilliant recipes are there by mistake, and many times it didn't make any sense until it happened, and like, we've never expected this, and that's the true brilliance and intelligence of creating something. And maybe AI can do a lot of that. I'm not against that, don't get me wrong, and it's interesting to see different angles, but you know me, I like the octopus approach, the fluidity, the unexpected, the without thinking, the something you drop into your soup by accident and you taste it and you're thinking, my God, this was the ingredient that was always missing. And I was yesterday at a book presentation of one of the founding members of the octopus movement, Els van Noordam, and she is a Olympic short put champion. And very interesting. And she showed a video, I forgot his name, but God, this sounds really stupid. I'm trying to find the English words, but it's jumping very high, and this guy who was mediocre at jumping high found out that if he puts his shoulders first and then the rest of his body, then it was easier for him, and he got there almost by accident because he was not very good in jumping high, and so his theory became the leading theory in jumping high and in sports. I sound really stupid, sorry. But it was an accident. It was very human. And then everybody did that. He won the gold medal. He jumped like 2 meters, 10 centimeters. It was crazy. He used to jump 1 meter 50 or something like that. And I love that. It's a human accident. And then he did it. And then he did something else. Like, okay, figure that out. And he changed his profession. He stopped doing that after his gold medal and started to work in companies and doing complete other things. Meaning, I love it when there is an accident. I love it when things go wrong. I love it when
I agree that there has to be serendipity or accident, but I also want to point out that someone have to notice it's an accident. Someone have to notice that the serendipity has happened, because if you don't notice it, it might just go. Maybe he was doing this maybe in that instance he happened to notice it. For me, it's more about bringing these two things together, because as someone who is an experimentalist, I have done a lot of high throughput experiments. It means that you test a lot of conditions, thousands of them at the same time, and you see what has worked. And if you do not know the nuances of it, it's very difficult to say which is like 2 meters high, which you can use to jump 2 meters high, or which of the conditions will not help you to even reach that 1 meter 50 or something like that, right? So for me, in a way, robotics will allow us to do more experiments and to do that, create or engineer that serendipity. For me, as someone who wants to test many conditions at the same time and who is impatient, for me. But then accidents need to happen, serendipities need to happen. Completely agree on that.